right, Joe, we have a big week coming up. We have the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee scheduling a vote for Wednesday to subpoena former Ukrainian politician Andrei Telishchenko.
Nice.
How did I do with that? Pretty good, huh? I gotta brush up on my Russian. This is all with Hunter Biden's potential role in helping the Ukraine firm Burisma Holdings evade corruption charges. He also has connections, though, with Alexandra Chalupa and others. Do we see this go anywhere? We now have Mitt Romney on board. Originally, he was not, but now he says he will be for getting subpoenaing Telishchenko in order to find out more about Hunter Biden.
It's pretty clear now that with Romney's agreement that the subpoena for Telishchenko will go forward. Telishchenko is being subpoenaed because he says he has an agreement with one of his former employers, Blue Star Strategies, which was a Hunter Biden friend company, which was brought in by Burisma to get the investigation of them stopped in Ukraine, and they succeeded. The issue is Telishchenko has records, he claims, from Blue Star Strategies, which show all of this, as well as some other things, including payments. That is what Chairman Ron Johnson wants access to. He also shows through his testimony, Telishchenko, that it was the Democrats who first started getting a foreign government involved in the 2016 election by working with the Ukrainian embassy in Washington to investigate Paul Manafort and the Trump campaign. That was the first effort by anybody to bring a foreign government into the election. In fact, it was the only effort, followed up by many, many more efforts by the Democrats to use Ukrainian politicians, which led inevitably to the creation of the famous false black ledger against Manafort, which will come into play more in the near future.
This guy Telishchenko, isn't he willing to be a voluntary witness in all of this?
Yes. He's actually spoken with U.S. authorities and with U.S. lawyers in the past, but the documents that he has are subject to a non-disclosure agreement, and he says the only way he can disclose those Blue Star Strategies documents is by being legally subpoenaed, and that is what the committee is doing.
Oh, I see. That explains the subpoena. That's what I was looking for. Thank you,
right.
As always, Joe diGenova. So that's pretty amazing. So hopefully we see some movement on that. Meanwhile, I do want to ask you about this kind of, it looks like unprecedented moment. A judge last week attacked Bill Barr, the Attorney General of the United States, issued this very aggressive rebuke of Bill Barr, suggesting that he had done something untoward in his first characterization of the Mueller report, and is now demanding to see the unredacted portions of the Mueller report broadly to assess whether or not Bill Barr's initial statements on the matter were accurate. My question, Joe, is how could he attack Barr's credibility if he doesn't actually know what's underneath the redactions?
Well, that's a very good question. And in fact, what you are witnessing in the case of Judge Reggie Walton, who is the federal judge you're talking about here in U.S. District Court in D.C., is the legal version of coronavirus. Federal judges apparently have gotten into the mood of talking a lot about their jobs and talking about people who are in front of them in court and holding closed hearings where journalists and the public are not allowed, like Amy Berman Jackson. Something is very amiss in the federal judiciary. They can do all this blathering, and yet they can't run the FISA court and figure out how to stop people lying to them. So Judge Walton went out and made what I consider to be inappropriate remarks for a jurist about in a Freedom of Information Act case. He decided that he was concerned about whether or not the Attorney General, Bill Barr, had misled the public and spoken incorrectly about the substance of the report from Mueller. Well, guess what? It's not his job to opine about public statements by the Attorney General. His job is to release or not release certain public information which is sought under the Freedom of Information Act. This gratuitous slap at the Attorney General is part of a pattern by judges and so-called legal activists who are nothing more than left-wing hacks, the activists, not the judges. But the judges have fallen victim to this notion that somehow because Donald Trump is president, they're not limited anymore by the canons of judicial ethics. Well, guess what? They are. And I think Judge Walton, who gave some interview recently having nothing to do with this Freedom of Information Act about his role as a federal judge on the FISA court, needs to really basically step back and be quiet. And maybe they ought to figure out how to run the FISA court a little better.
But, Joe, is there any way to, I guess, put some of these judges back in their place who are activist judges because they serve for life, a lot of these positions? So there's nothing to prevent them from becoming politically active.
Well, they all serve, federal judges all serve for life tenure, which is to insulate them from political pressure. But when you insulate them, you do not give them license to talk politically. Now, the Chief Justice started all of this a couple of years ago when he allegedly rebuked the president for making comments about a judge out west. And then he got involved in having to defend two justices, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, as a result of the incredibly outrageous assault, threatening, dangerous language by Chuck Schumer last week. This is what happens when judges get drawn into political debates. The best thing for these judges and justices is to shut up and to allow people on the outside, like the American Bar Association or lawyers like myself, to defend them. The problem is they decided they need to speak up, and they think they're allowed to do that now in the Trump era. Big mistake. It's going to lead to the politicization of the judiciary in a much larger and cheaper sense. And the federal judges, by the way, who are given life tenure are not controllable. You can't control them. You can only impeach them and remove them from office. That is the only control against out-of-control federal judges. There are disciplinary mechanisms inside each federal judicial circuit, but they are rarely used, and the judges do not like to judge each other. But right now, there is a big flu going through the federal judiciary, and it's called the big mouth.
Well, there's another sickness that Washington may kick the can on this very week. And I want to, Joe, if you have time, I'd like to hold you. We'd keep you with us. Good, because there's a big story this week that nobody is talking about, and I want to talk about it with Joe diGenova. All right, we're talking to Joe diGenova, former U.S. attorney, legal analyst, always helping us out. Joe, a gigantic story this week that I think has really flown under the radar. 3 provisions in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, that is FISA, are set to expire this very week unless Congress agrees on a last-minute deal to extend those surveillance provisions. The president has expressed unhappiness with FISA, specifically the FISA court and the way it's been abused, and he wants to see dramatic reforms put in place before any extension. But meanwhile, Attorney General Bill Barr is reportedly pushing for a clean extension, arguing that the Justice Department can handle reforms. What are we to make of all of this?
Well, this is the massive battle about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which was spawned by the illegal spying conducted by James Comey, Sally Yates, Loretta Lynch, and people in the Justice Department during the Obama administration and the assault on the Trump campaign and Trump individuals. This is a battle between people who think they know better than the people in the intelligence community who love this power, people of goodwill like Bill Barr who understand that these provisions, when used properly and with honesty, help protect America. There are people on the other side who believe that these provisions are so dangerous that massive new controls need to be placed on them. Because, and let me just tell you where I am. I'm of the belief that there is nothing that you can do to reform these laws that will ensure that you have honest people implementing them. The danger with FISA is that no matter what you write down on paper, a James Comey, a Sally Yates, and a Mr. McCabe will come along, and they will disobey whatever you write down. So the answer is, of course we need to have FISA, and of course we need to continue its use to protect us from terrorism. But what we don't need to do is use FISA against political campaigns. And that is what happened in 2016. The law was abused for political purposes by James Comey, Sally Yates. President Obama was personally aware of the use to what it was being put. And as a result, FISA was corrupted like it has never been corrupted before. As a result, those people, Obama, Yates, McCabe, Comey, have all put at risk the very important intelligence collection systems that we do need under FISA. You know what? There's not much you can do about this in a democracy. Once you get to this point where people have broken the law and they have not been held accountable, like Comey, McCabe, and Sally Yates, you get in a mess like this. And it's really sad, but there's nothing we can do about it except work through it. And it ain't going to be pretty.
So you think that they're going to just re-up it, or are we going to see a change?
I think that there are so many problems with people in the House and the Senate who do not believe that the FBI has been reformed under Chris Wray. They think that Chris Wray is an empty suit. They think he's a joke. They think they talk to the FBI line people, and they know that the line people think that Chris Wray is a joke. Nobody believes anything that Chris Wray says about FISA. Remember, the FBI runs FISA. Sure, they work through lawyers in the Justice Department, but when all is said and done, it's the FBI people who put the affidavits together and swear to the truth of those documents. And remember, it was an FBI lawyer who literally falsified a document so that Carter Page could be spied upon. We're in a bad place, and we're in a bad place for one reason. Barack Obama corrupted the FISA process and the 2016 election through his minions, McCabe, Comey, Sally Yates, Loretta Lynch, and all the clowns at and John Brennan and James Clapper. Thanks a lot, folks. Remember when Obama likes to say, gee, thanks, President Obama, when he talks about the economy? FISA mess. Thanks, Obama.
I mean, there's something, if they rubber stamp this week, Joe, they're going to allow a fundamentally unconstitutional arrangement to continue because American civil liberties, we look at Carter Page as the perfect example here, the one we know about. Imagine the stories we don't. And in Carter Page's case, we know that his civil liberties were violated. It was on the basis of a lie. He had no way of actually defending himself in the court because he didn't even know the process was playing out. Everything about that is explicitly unconstitutional, and Washington is on the verge of rubber stamping that system.
I think they'll at most get a very limited extension, like 3 months again, something like that,
yeah.
while people of goodwill try to work this out. But make no mistake about it. What went on in 2014, 15, 16, and some of which we haven't even talked about, the massive abuse of unmasking, none of which nobody's been held accountable for the unmasking, which Susan Rice and others admitted to, and Samantha Powers, who had 250 unmaskings under her name, which she said she knew nothing about. That's BS. She knew nothing about it. And why has nobody been prosecuted for the leak of the Michael Flynn Kislyak phone call, Ambassador Kislyak phone call? Why has nobody been prosecuted for that? The bottom line is these unanswered questions are what's now dogging FISA.
Right.
There are too many unanswered questions. And until that gets fixed and somebody goes to prison or gets indicted, it's not going to get any better.
And everyone in this city keeps wondering why Donald Trump got elected. And the answer is garbage like this. If you let
You're looking at it.
Yeah, if you let this happen again, it's a total betrayal of the voters, and they're going to hold you accountable for it. They're going to point directly at you.
And by the way, if they pass something he doesn't like, he'll veto it. And they don't have a veto-proof majority on this issue.
This is a giant story. Joe, thanks for helping us cover it this week.
You bet.